Coming up on episode 87 of the Behind the Back podcast, the Kings made some additions to their coaching staff, so Ben and I talk about that before pivoting on to round 2 of the NBA playoffs and talking about the matchup so far. We just witnessed a crazy game in Boston before we recorded here, and we just had to talk about the craziness that's been having, all the upsets, and who we think are going to be moving on to the conference finals. And after that, we pivot on to some Eagles news, talk about Dallas Goedert re-signing with the Eagles and what that means. But with that being said, y'all, let's get it. All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Behind the Back podcast. We are your hosts. I am Marcos Conan Negron, and beside me here, as always, is Ben, the Jet Rets. Ben, how are you, brother?
I'm doing well, man. I got no complaints. How about you?
Same. Another work week. It's been pretty busy this week, but it's helped go by pretty fast. And on top of that, just a lot of crazy sports going on. So we're gonna definitely talk about that. Ben and I we're about to break down everything that has to do with the NBA playoffs so far, and our takes on some of the most recent action that we just saw. We are recording now. The Boston Celtics New York Knicks game 2 just ended in pretty crazy fashion. So before we get into that, in the intro we did mention we need to talk about our Sacramento Kings here for a second. Nothing crazy. Just gonna Scott Perry is building up his front office now. And Ben here is going to enlighten us on some of the new additions that are on board. Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, so it's an exciting start to the offseason, I think, for the Kings. This is kind of how you wanted it to start. And one of the conversations that you and I kind of touched on was we wanted to make sure that Scott Perry has the control that he needs, right? And so far, it's felt like he does. So the Kings announced that they have hired assistant general manager BJ Armstrong. He's a good and trusted friend of Scott Perry's. He was MJ's, Michael Jordan's point guard, and was the key or one of the keys to winning the 3 NBA titles that he had with them in 91, 92, and 93. Armstrong was named an all-star, averaging a career high of 14.8 points in 93 and 94. In his career, he averaged 10 points per game, 3 assists on 42.5 shooting from three-point land. He retired in 99-2000 season, where he then joined the Bulls front office as a special assistant to the VP of basketball ops, who was Jerry Krause. He would then go on to be a scout for the team before departing. Post-departure, he was heavily involved with the NBA and around the NBA as an analyst for ESPN and a player agent for Wasserman Group, who also represented a number of players, including Derrick Rose, Bismack Biyombo. So this guy is, he's got a lot of history in the league, right? And that dates back to him just being a player. A fun little nugget for you and I here, Marcos. BJ was co-host on a podcast called the Hoop Genius Podcast, where he frequently invited Scott Perry as a guest. So this tells me that you and I are on track right now to becoming general managers of some team here in the future. But overall, man, this move of an assistant GM doesn't bother me like the last situation does. The last time was Monty and Wes, right? Monty McNair and Wes Wilcox as assistant general manager. They directly competed for that general manager job prior to Monty being granted the position. And then after that, Wes was named the assistant GM. So this one's a bit different because BJ and Perry have close ties with each other and they have a pre-existing friendship. They weren't directly competing for the position, so it's likely to work better. So overall, I like this move. I think it's going to be a strong move. It's not a move that necessarily hurts us. So what do you think about it?
I think it's always a good thing when you can get, like we mentioned, we see this all the time in the NBA where power struggles and dynamics in the GM coach dynamic or GM assistant GM dynamic, or even in the GM and the owners dynamic, it's really toxic and complicated, and it really is hard to maintain relationships when there's always competition for the next level. So to have a guy in BJ Armstrong who is who actually enjoys working with Scott, I think is something that's going to be a huge benefit for the team. And, again, their roles are much more specific this time around. It's not a direct competition, like you said. So I think that's good that it's more of like a right-hand man situation. And I do think that given the, craziness Vivek likes to instill, I do think having someone in Armstrong who can back up Perry when he wants to make a decision or wants to say, hey, we should probably move forward with this. And a guy who has the experience that he does, like Armstrong, probably will carry some weight, especially with someone like Vivek. So I do like this move. Like you said, we won't know until we know for sure, but that it's a good front office decision, which is something we haven't gotten much of lately.
Exactly. So moving on to the next bit of news, the Kings are finalizing a deal to make to make Mike Woodson the lead assistant coach under Doug Christie. Woodson is a former player for the Kansas City and Sacramento Kings in 11 years at the NBA level. Final year with the Kings was in '86, which was also the first year that that the Kings were in Sacktown. So I thought that's kind of cool. Been a coach since 1996, head coach of the Hawks, the Knicks, the Pacers. He was assistant coach for several other teams, including the Bucks, the Cavaliers, Sixers, and the Clippers as well. Woodson led the Hawks and the Knicks to 5 playoff experiences, including 3 Eastern Conference Finals appearances. So overall, I think this is a strong hire. It's another one of those hires that, both you have your coach and your general manager who are on the same page as to, someone that they want to bring in, somebody that they feel is the right move. And so for me, I feel like as long as you're ready to set this identity and everybody's on the same page and moving forward, I think this is going to be a really strong move. I think that Woodson is going to be more on the offensive side of operations. He's got some really good offensive game plans and schemes that he likes to run. So I'm curious to see what kind of leverage he has in that kind of incorporation of a system. But overall, dude, I like this hire for the Kings, and I'm interested to see how it'll work out.
Yeah, and I think it's good with Mike specifically. He with a lot of head coaching experience, a lot of assistant coach experience. That's one of those things that it's hard to find on an NBA bench. Like you see it all over on a lot of these benches. You'll see groups of just talented coaches. You're like, oh yeah, I remember he was a head coach. Like when did this happen? So to have Woodson here, like we talked about, when our coaching staff, once Mike Brown got let go, kind of started going away a little bit, and Luke Laux, going to FSU and things like that. But you bring someone with true experience, like you said, who can offer insight and a potential, he can be the one to be responsible for adding new wrinkles and actually creating an offensive system around the players that we have. That's exciting. So, having him on board and them filling out the coaching staff with reliable pieces, I think is something that's going to be really important that now that we're trusting Doug Christie as our head coach. This will be his first full go around next year. So having as much experience as possible behind him is going to be helpful.
Yeah, agreed. So last bit of news here, and it's not official by any stretch yet. However, due to the conversations and the reports that have come out, it sounds likely, and we'll obviously keep up to date on that. But former teammate of Doug Christie, Bobby Jackson, is reportedly in talks to be an assistant coach for the Sacramento Kings as well. Obviously, former teammate with Doug Christie during the golden era of Sacramento Kings basketball. They went as far as a 3-2 series lead on the Lakers in 2001, needing just one more win to advance to the finals when Tim Donaghy and other officials called the game so poorly and influenced the outcome of that game. So the Lakers were able to steal the win and push to a Game 7 where ultimately they advance on to win the chip. We all know the story, but if you don't want to if you want to learn more about this, you can absolutely find documentaries all over YouTube and all over the place. But I won't get more into that because I'll just get frustrated. But Jackson started his coaching career with Sacramento in 2013, where he went on as player development coach with the Timberwolves before returning to Sac as an assistant under Luke Walton. Jackson was then named head coach of the Stockton Kings before the Sixers then hired him as an assistant in 2023. Overall, I love Bobby Jackson. I've got a bobblehead of his along with some of the other Sacktown goats, including Doug. So this hire is cool. I don't think it, makes us better per se, But from a standpoint of, like I just said, being on the same page and establishing an identity, I believe these are good first steps, and Bobby's certainly going to help with, incorporating kind of that winning mentality.
Absolutely. And he had a ton of success as a G League coach. I think that was one of the things that he showed right away. He has a talent for player development. And again, familiar with the team, familiar with the city. So that's always a good thing. Even if he's not familiar with this cast and crew of players, I trust a person like Bobby Jackson to actually, get the most out of some of these guys because he understands what it takes. And I think having him, alongside he's going to be a good presence, offer kind of what Doug offered to Mike Brown in that sense. I think it's going to kind of be that role, the guy who can operate more as the player's coach and really just kind of get the nice message across when Doug needs to get the, stern message across. So, I'm excited for that.
Yeah, exactly. And, going off of just building real quickly off of your point on the player development standpoint, I think now you have a really nice player development situation in Sacramento that you're kind of building. You've got Leandro Barbosa, who is likely to stick around here, and you've got now, Bobby Jackson. These are OGs. These guys have been in the league. They've been balling for years, and so they, and they were both playing in different, eras of basketball. So they have a lot to offer from a historical standpoint. They also have a lot to offer in terms of, being around the game for as many years as they have been continuously. So I'm really excited to see how that development, plays off onto the team. But ultimately, man, this was a good couple days here in Sacramento, and this was, all the news we have on it today. We'll stay up to date on everything that, is officially announced. Again, we're waiting on that Bobby Jackson one. Hopefully it happens. But ultimately, it was a nice few days, and it was kind of refreshing after a lot of the bad news, that essentially ended the year.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a good place to be. We don't need to do anything flashy. We need to build a foundation again. So them doing these moves is definitely a good sign. So like Ben said, when we get more news, we'll update you. But this is the off season. This is the slowest time for now. So we're going to take advantage of all we can. But it's slow for the Kings, but not for the team still remaining in the playoffs. So let's go switch over to talk about some round 2 matchups. And we wanted to start, obviously, OKC and Denver are playing right now in game 2. And when we get to them, we'll get to them last out of this grouping, and then we'll kind of see where they're at and kind of pivot off of that and go that way. But we talk about the game that we just saw. The Boston Celtics stunned again at home by the New York Knicks. And now the Knicks are up 2-0 as a road team. And I was going to use this stat for the Pacers because they also did the same thing, but the odds are not in the Celtics' favor. And I think there's been 45 instances where there has been, where the road team has won the first 2 games. And only 5 of those teams who were down 2-0, went on to win the series. So it's not impossible. And it is a smaller sample size because this doesn't happen that often. But it's a tough situation to be in if you're Boston. So let's take it from the Boston side of things. Is it really just as simple as, in your opinion, as they just shot too many threes? Or do you think that there was a little bit more that maybe something we're not noticing here?
I actually think it has a large majority of the reason why they've lost those first 2 games. Obviously they had big leads, the Celtics did, in both of these, first 2 games, and ultimately ended up blowing it in the fourth quarter. And, from Boston's standpoint, in the first game, you shoot 63 pointers, and in the second game, you shoot 43 pointers. You shot 103 pointers, and you've really only made 25 of them. So, to me, it's a little wild that you have 2 of the best slashers in the league, in Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, who they can get downhill. We saw it at the end of game 2 when Jason Tatum took it coast to coast with ease. He read that step up from center Robinson, and he went all the way to the basket. I'm like, where was this the entire game? Especially when you went, 10 straight possessions without a bucket? At that point, get inside. How many times did we see Jason Tatum just fiddle around and then terrible bounce pass over to Derek White for a contested 3-pointer? So It's like you're shooting all these threes, you're not getting downhill properly, and ultimately you're setting yourself up for a playoff choke and disaster. It's gross right now what Boston's playing.
Yeah, and like to your point, you mentioned 10 straight plus possessions without a basket. In real time, in the fourth quarter, they went over 7 minutes without scoring, and they didn't. Their last bucket that they scored outside of the Jason Tatum dunk was a free throw that he made too. So that was pathetic. It was a really sad showing for a team that had 20-point leads in both of these games and let it go completely by just shooting yourself in the foot, by not taking advantage, by not being aggressive, by not getting to the rim. And I understand the other side of the argument, because I was gonna come on here when I thought the Celtics were gonna win. I was gonna come on here and be like, listen, game one, fluky. Yeah, they shot 60. I get it, it's a lot, but this is their MO. They average 43 shots from three per game. That was it for the regular season. So, it wasn't that absurd to me. It's annoying watching them play. It's not fun watching them play, but that has been the recipe for success. And it almost kind of feels like a level of the Celtics kind of saying, F you, we're going to win our way. We're going to win the way that we want to win. And that's just jacking up threes altogether. And there was a crazy stat too from game one when they shot 60, and like 42 of them were actually not contested. They were deemed open shots,
Right.
and they missed like 27 of them. So it was like they're getting open looks, and it's almost like the Knicks are saying, you're cold right now, get hot, and then we'll start defending you guys. So, I mean, honestly, for the Celtics, you play sloppy. You're the better team. I don't understand what we're doing here. And to let Mikal Bridges close you out in the last second of the game twice is kind of sad too. I was just like, it was a bad game.
One, you mentioned, the Celtics saying, we're going to beat you our way. This isn't the Celtics brand of basketball. And that's exactly what I was thinking in this, in the second game, watching them just hook up three after three. I mean, you saw so many times when they were a powerhouse, like they're not a powerhouse anymore, right? But while they were on their championship run and while they were, these last 4 seasons building what they've got now, you didn't see them just settle for 3-pointers like this. When they would get down and they, or start to blow a lead and shots weren't falling from the perimeter, they got inside. And that was something that you could consistently rely on with this team, was they were going to find a way to still break down your defense, get a bucket when it matters, and close out a game regardless of how much effort you put in at the end. I'm not seeing that from Boston this year. And I haven't seen it throughout the regular season. The freaking Sacramento Kings went in there into Boston and caught a dub. I'm sorry, but that already is sketch enough. And the way that you let the Kings do it, you remember that game. Celtics couldn't make anything from the perimeter. We made everything from the perimeter. It was very much a case of what's happening in this, Knicks series right now.
Yeah, and what makes this worse is that the Knicks haven't been playing that well either. Like the conversation after game one was, oh, the Celtics played like a C game and they, only lost by 1. They gave it away. But if they played any better, they would have won that game. The Knicks, very same thing. They've been playing C plus. It's been a C plus series in terms of the product we're getting on the court. Both teams only putting up 90 points is absurd. And we're also seeing these guys. I think the NBA, and I don't know if this, I don't know if this is a me thing or like me just like now noticing just how different the playoffs are in terms of like the environment, in terms of the physicality. Like these past couple years, they've been leaning towards a more like, oh, regular season is a little, you're going to get away with more things. And in the postseason, it's like, we're just going to let you guys play. And I still see these guys complain all the time. And I'm like, you're in the playoffs, dude. You have other things to worry about instead of, oh, if I'm going to get a foul call. And I also think the Celtics, like, I wonder how much of this for them is, they kind of got used to with Joe Mazzulla coaching them in this style of play, just saying, hey, and he's always adamant. He's like, oh, I'm cool with them shooting all these shots. That's what we want to do. And you're taking away from, I think, Tatum and, Brown, it's not the same anymore for them to drive in there. It's like they need to relearn that skill again, because that's, you saw them trying to do it. And Jalen had some success early on, and you would think that you could just find your matchup on New York and just attack them. Get Jaylen Brown switched on to Brunson every play and just run that and, just go and attack him. It sounds simple enough, but clearly, the Knicks had a good game plan in Boston. The question is, will they be able to come back now? And I think if we did, because we could do this hypothetical, because I'll ask you now, just to kind of get a feel for it, because I think we would feel the same way about it if OKC, Boston, and Cleveland, let's say OKC in theory loses tonight, all those teams would have been 0-2.
Mhm.
Which one of them would you feel most confident in could win their series down 0-2? And I would think with the experience, the championship level experience, I think Boston of those three would be the most likely to come back and still be able to win this series. But
even from a matchup standpoint, that makes sense. So I do agree.
yeah, so it's just, so for me, what worries me about Boston is, are they going to shake out of this rut? And are they going to try and shoot themselves out of this rut? Because if this is what it's going to be, I'm worried for them, because it's not like, yes, the Knicks have been giving up open shots, but they're matching them with their physicality. They don't care. And now that the Knicks have 2 wins on them when they were getting steamrolled all year by this team, the Knicks have really flipped the script. And Boston kind of looks like they don't know what hit them. So definitely something to note for the Boston side of things. But I believe they can, if any of the 3 teams that are or if any of the teams that are down 0-2 can come back, I think it's Boston.
Yeah, well, and I mean, you got to keep in mind, Boston at some point in both games was up by a good amount, by a comfortable amount. So who what feels like the better team is in this series. It doesn't make sense to me, and hats off, but it doesn't make sense to me that New York is ahead. In this series, not just 1-1, but by 2.
Yeah,
like by 2 to walk out of Boston with 2 wins like that. That's aggressive. So, shout out New York. If I had to make a pick for this series, Marcos, we just had to talk. I think Boston's going to figure it out. I think they're going to stop shooting as many threes. I think they're probably going to steal one for sure. I think they steal at least one in Madison Square Garden. As far as the second game, that's where things get weird, right? If they can pick up the second game, I for sure believe that Boston wins the series. But if they walk out of there with a split one, I feel like New York could storm into Boston and find some momentum and sneak out a dub. So it's relying on this trip. I'm going to say that Boston finds a way to pick up both games in New York. It sounds crazy, but I think they do. They even up the series. They come back, home, get kind of that home court advantage back with a dub. And then from there, they just got to get one more win. So I got Boston. I'm going to call it in 7 games because this is a damn good matchup.
Yeah, I think if Boston wins, it turns into a 7-game series. That's what it's going to need to take. I do think they drop one more. And they need to muster up. Like, I know that Kristaps is dealing with an illness that's apparently been lingering for a while, and he's been in and out.
Respiratory.
Yeah, so it's been bugging him for a few months, is what they're saying, and they didn't even know what was bugging him a few months ago. Is what the report was. They said that he had an illness. They weren't sure where it came from, and it was affecting his his endurance, his stamina, and everything like that. And it just came out of nowhere in Game 1, and that's why he had to exit. And in Game 2, we saw him in spurts, but that's the problem. You take away some major. Yeah, you take away some major size in this matchup. Kristaps is a huge part of what they do. So, that could be an underrated element of it all, but it is one player. And you think with Boston, with the Knicks, they did all the right things and never gave up. They just played scrappy and gave themselves a chance to, advance in this game and they just played physical. They finally matched up at the end, and Mikal Bridges was awesome. And that's why you trade for him. That's why you have OG Anunoby, last year. They can match up with this team. And they can make a game ugly. And all the Knicks have to do is be within striking distance. And freaking Brunson in the clutch is going to make a tough bucket. Mikal Bridges is going to make an awesome play defensively. And the New York Knicks are just scrappy and believe in themselves enough, especially now that they're up 2-0. So if I'm the Knicks, you win this series if you win the next game, is how I feel. I think if Boston goes down 3-0, it's going to be hard to go. I agree that if they lose game 2, game 4, if Boston loses game 4, I'm not as nervous as I would be if they lose game 3. So the Knicks have, they're going to have a lot of energy in this one, knowing that this could potentially be a dagger game in game 3.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so let's talk about another fun game that, features the most overrated player in the NBA, and our favorite guy, Tyrese Haliburton. The Indiana Pacers walked off the Cleveland Cavaliers on the road again and also became, held a 2-0 lead against a home team. Now, this one's a little different. This one is, we're going to talk about a lot of things here, but I think the story of this series is Cleveland being hurt, the injuries.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, it's not the same as, this is what makes like Boston, New York weird, because the Celtics are relatively healthy. They have their studs. I don't understand what's going on here, but the Cavs, you're missing 3 of your 5 starters, and Donovan Mitchell goes nuclear, and you have a lead with 40 seconds, 7-point lead with 40 seconds to go, and the only other team to come back and win that, or one of the 3 teams to do that, were the Pacers, and they did that with Milwaukee last week in round 1, where they came back down 7 with under 40 seconds to go. They do the same thing again in Cleveland, and again, to put this in context, guys, so now that they've done this twice, there's only one other team that's done that. So 3 out of 1,695 games in that situation, the team down 7 won, and the Indiana Pacers have done that twice now in these playoffs. So
wow,
they're doing weird things, and also like the Knicks, they were down 20 in both of these games. So it's like Cleveland was in control, and they just took their foot off the gas. And there was that, it was questionable hustle. Donovan Mitchell's now 1-7 when he takes 30 or more shots. And it's one of those things where, like, yeah, he plays awesome, but in the games that he plays awesome and does this, they never win. So it's one of those things where you're like, he really needs his crew back if they really want to maintain it. And I think it sucks because they were missing those 3 guys and they were in control the whole game until the end. And that's the one you can't let go. And now I'm way less confident in Cleveland, because I just don't know where the health of their guys are going to be. And now Donovan's and he's pushing through whatever, calf and ankle. He's just throwing his body on the floor every play. It was just a tough game to watch, like a dagger for Cleveland, because this was our team in the East that we felt like could make some noise. So it was a crazy game. Tyrese can, hang his nuts out or whatever the heck he decided to do there. That was a crazy end. He shouldn't have gotten that board.
Yeah.
That's on Cleveland too. So there was just so much that came into this game. What do you think about it?
Well, there was so much that went into that last, minute, really, that didn't need to be there. And yeah, hats off to Indiana and really to Tyrese for closing out the game. But how many things had to go your way for you to even get that opportunity in the first place? Absolutely hats off. I think it was, it's a cool moment for him. It's a cool moment for Indiana. But the story in this one very much so is the injuries, because, all season long, we saw the Cavs have a lot of, strength in terms of their, reliability from a health standpoint. And remember 2022, 2023, when the Kings made the playoffs? That I know, crazy. But remember that when we had all that health throughout that entire year, and obviously we started to have some injury trouble at the end of it with Domas and then with Fox and his finger, right? But we still had our guys. Had we gotten to the second round, who knows what that looked like? And this is kind of a similar situation in some ways. By no means are we the same caliber team that Cleveland is this year, right? But Cleveland had a ton of success throughout the regular season, dominated the Eastern Conference. And they stayed healthy all season long. And then they hit the playoffs and they're faced with a more physical game, like you mentioned. There's a lot more stakes. The stakes are higher and whatever, right? And all of a sudden, these injuries are piling up. You've got Mobley out. You've got Garland out. You've got Hunter out. 3 of your best 5 guys, like you said. This is a situation for Cleveland that, from a depth standpoint, doesn't feel like it's easy to come out of now, especially because you got to go into Indy and try to steal at least one, right? Obviously, if you don't steal one in Indiana, it's over, So trying to steal one, not having 3 of those guys is going to be really tough. I know they had the lead, but that, in a lot of ways, what did I text you before the game? Before game 2, I texted you. I said, I think they're going to try and surprise them. I think they're going to come out hot and kind of catch, the Pacers off guard. Yeah, they're banged up, but, we're not out of it kind of thing. They started hot. It was a nice start to the game. Now it feels a little bit different because you're down 2 games. You got to try and dig something out here. You're not on your home court. You've got to develop your own momentum. You've got to find your own energy. You can't feed off the building necessarily unless you've got that villain energy like a guy like Dylan Brooks or Draymond Green, right? So this is a tough situation that Cleveland's found themselves in. I can't even necessarily say they put themselves there because, in a lot of ways it's the injuries, but at the same time, you put yourselves there from a standpoint of you could have closed the game a little bit better. Yeah, you're relying on guys that don't normally see those crunch time minutes, but nonetheless, these are, experienced NBA players who are playing on a very experienced team. You've been at these levels, you've played these games. So I'm concerned with Cleveland. Cleveland was one of my top picks, and I kind of coerced you into believing them too. And we find ourselves in an interesting spot now.
Yeah, and those last couple plays, that Max Strus toss into the that out of bounds play, like I don't understand what the heck that was, and like they didn't plan that well. When you're trying to throw it into Ty Jerome, who also was a no-show, he's been a no-show in this series as well, and that sucks.
All playoffs.
You need your sixth man. Like he was one of the 6 men of the year candidates. He was going off, and disappears. So on top of that, and then Donovan Mitchell fell asleep on that Aaron Nesmith putback dunk where he could, if he just got, was aware and didn't let him get down, that play wouldn't have happened either. So
right.
Little things like that. And that's what costs you series. And unfortunately for Donovan Mitchell, it's starting to become a theme for him that he doesn't make it past the second round. And it's tough that this year, again, to hammer out that point on the injuries, they were the 5th healthiest team this year in terms of games missed by starters. So they, like you said, they were a healthy team. They weren't really dealing with it until the worst time possible. And that sucks. It has the rumbling around Cleveland is that they don't believe some of these players are as hurt as they claim they are, which is kind of terrible to think that these guys aren't actually trying. Like to think that fans would think that,
they're just down bad.
And they're like Darius Garland. They're like, how bad is a turf toe? And I'm like, dude, you can't play for weeks off of that. So I'm like,
what are we talking about?
So right it sucks because Cleveland might be one of those teams that may think they need to blow it up when they really don't have to, because they have this awesome regular season. And I wonder, just some of these pieces, they're like, we might need to go and fix something here, or maybe salvage something. I don't know how they feel because they just haven't had any success. They've been a great regular season team, have gotten better every single year, and have literally nothing to show for it. So I just think that, there's only so much time they can waste. I still think you still keep your core. I think the starting 5 is good, but I think they need to iron out some depth pieces that can help them better fit their system when guys go down, because I think that's the issue. You're getting guys who can't defend. Your top 5 players can defend, and then once you get into your bench players, you guys got hot scorers who can pop off and a couple defenders. It's just not the same thing.
But see, again, that's kind of the recipe, right? That's kind of the recipe for a dominant ball club. We've seen that so many times where your starting 5 has a perfect mix of offense, defense, and that defense does just enough or more than enough to keep you in ball games or more importantly, dominate ball games. But then your bench just comes out and they excel in either defense or offense. So as long as you have one or the other, unlike the Kings who have none of it, that's been the recipe for success. So from a blow it up standpoint for Cleveland, and we'll have this off-season conversation after they, lose the series 4-0. But, from a blow-it-up standpoint, you can't blow up that core for sure. I don't even feel like you need to necessarily, blow up the bench or anything. I think you can try and maybe get some guys who, like a Harrison Barnes style player where, he's constantly available, plays 82 games a season, wins the awards for doing so, right? Like you can find those kinds of players and do kind of an even swap. But from a standpoint of them needing to get better, they can win a championship with this roster. It seriously does, to me, come down to just their availability. And that's what you have to focus on. Then that sucks, because that's one thing you never really want to have to focus on.
Right. And then on the flip side of things, the Pacers are just, everything seems to be going right for them this playoffs. Listen, they've been dealing with a lot of drama in round 1, There was that whole snafu with John Haliburton, Tyrese Haliburton's dad, and Giannis Antetokounmpo, which now has Mr. Haliburton permanently banned from any home and road games. Which
Bro
is a
just
crazy
thought
thing.
he could start a fight with a former MVP or
Yeah.
not even as important, like just an NBA player. You're not that kind of guy.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, yeah, it was. I think in that moment it was a little disrespectful. Like, I get it, you're hyped and all that, and
Yeah.
I think it was Tyrese's mom on the side too was like hitting Giannis, on the side. He's like, "Hey, get off of John."
Was that his
Yeah, that
mom?
was his mom.
Oh
Yeah,
my!
yeah.
I thought that was just some crazy lady.
No,
Like,
no, no. Yeah,
oh
that was
my
his
god,
mom. Yeah, yeah. So that
that's a
was
bad look.
it was the wifey defending the hubby for sure, but it was definitely that was just a bad situation. Giannis handled it like a freaking champ. Like Giannis and Tyrese, they both did a really good job
Yeah,
of neutralizing that, and didn't matter for Tyrese as he's still out here hitting game winners. Um, he's another player. I think he hits him and Aaron Gordon this year joined Jamal Murray, LeBron James, and there was another guy I forget with multiple playoff game winners in a single postseason with multiple. So
multiple being 3.
two, multiple being two, and
So
it's with
Aaron, yeah, okay,
and it's with and this criteria was a game winner in the last 5 seconds or less.
got it.
So in the last 5 seconds or less, it was Jamal in last year, and then it was Tyrese and Aaron Gordon this year,
This
and then
year, yeah.
LeBron was in 2018, and then I forget who that first person was who did it before. Oh, it was Robert Horry. He was the one who made 2 game winners, and that was
I
in
didn't
02.
even
Yeah,
know
yeah,
that.
yeah, 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 yeah. So it was what they're doing, and we'll talk about AG here in a little bit, but what Tyrese is doing specifically, his game, like, the stats aren't going to say like he played fine. It wasn't like some insane game he had. He just stepped up in the clutch. He had 11 points in the fourth quarter. So this whole series with Cleveland and Indiana it's a weird series because Indiana shouldn't be up 2-0, but they're also like, they've been the most slept on team all year because we forget sometimes. And I also think it's the same thing with Minnesota, how people talk about them, that like we forget that this is the same exact team that went to the Eastern Conference Finals last year, albeit it's kind of unfolding in the same way where their path is against teams who are injury riddled and don't have their best players on the floor. So you're not really getting, the juggernaut matchups, but you play who's in front of you, and if the cards fall your way, that's just how it goes. And shout out to the Pacers, they're taking advantage of these and pulling out games they shouldn't. So they should be down 0-2. Instead, they're up 2-0 and in full control, and I think they're going to win the series.
Yeah, and I mean, I hate to say it, but it's true. Tyrese is one of, if not the best, there's an argument for it, the best player in the postseason right now. And to have that player on your team, and know that you have that player who's just cooking right now, you can take that a long ways. I mean, we've seen countless times guys carry their teams all the way to a championship, and ultimately, to win championships, it takes an all-out effort. You need your whole team to show up, and that's not to say that Indiana, the team, hasn't shown up, but look how many times the Pacers have had to come back into games to win, right? And it happened at least once against the Bucks, I believe, where they were down a decent amount and had to come back. So you got to hand it to their heart. You got to hand it to the fact that they don't give up, right? But you got to wonder too at the same time. And obviously, you've got teams in the East who are blowing big leads as well. You got to wonder if you can still put that same recipe and that same effect into play when it comes to winning a championship and winning those finals matchups. So yeah, I think the Pacers are one of the better teams right now. I think I would put them in the East if we had to rank those 4 teams. I'm putting them above New York. I don't think New York is better than any of the 3 other teams, but I don't think I still find myself putting the Pacers above the Cavs or the Celtics. And that's, maybe it's a biasy standpoint or a lack thereof, right? But I don't know. I kind of watch the Pacers team. They're a good team and they've got good pieces, right? But ultimately, like, I just don't see a championship forming in that city quite yet. But hey, prove me wrong.
Well, and I think this year, out of any, they actually have the best chance. I think when we're talking about this particular core, with this collection of guys, without adding another star, this is going to be as close as they get. And I do think to credit Tyrese one more time, and listen, I hate doing this, and I love and hate doing this because it's a bittersweet relationship that we
We
have
love Tyrese.
with our former point guard. But they threw up the stat on First Things First today when it came to players this season and their percentages and their shooting percentages in the final 2 minutes of the game. And that included the postseason as well. And Jalen Brunson was on one side. He was like 21 of 40. No, he was like 24 of 42. He was shooting like 56%. Jamal Murray was shooting like 57%, and he was taking 20 or 30 shots. And Tyrese, on a much smaller sample size, he's only taken 10 shots in those final 2 minutes, but he's 9 of 10. So when he takes a shot late in games, he's making it. It's a smart shot, even if he's driving to the rim, even if it's a layup or a dunk or whatever. But you're capitalizing at the biggest moments and you're being efficient. That's going to help things go your way. And I do think the Pacers are dealing with a case of things are kind of just falling, kind of falling their way right now. And
Cinderella run.
Right. You ride that momentum. So, if that launches you again to another trip to the Eastern Conference Finals, and you're seeing how things are playing in the Knicks series, you're wondering, wow, we actually have a shot this year to make it to the finals. And I know both of those other teams are saying the same thing about the Pacers, even though because you don't want to chance Cleveland getting their guys back for the next series, and then that's a different story. So it's like I think both the Knicks and the Celtics are like, I'll take a matchup with the Pacers any day over Cleveland, and we'll see, we'll take our chances. But for Indy, they're saying the same thing. They're like, Boston's down 0-2. Give us New York, and we can make this thing work. So definitely things are shaping up for the Pacers.
Yeah, they are. So if I had to pick a win in this one, man.
Knowing what you know about the injuries, we don't know. They're still questionable for Game 3. There's nothing for sure.
I rode with them to start the playoffs. I'm going to ride with them still. You don't have to take this side with me. We don't have to do the BTB picks, but yeah, I'm going to take the Cavs, and I think it's going to take 7 games. I don't think they do it in 5 or 6. Obviously not 5.
Yeah.
But I don't think they do it in 6 games. I think they're going to drop one more similar to the other series that we talked about. So 7 games, Cavs do find a way.
Yeah, if the Cavs don't get any of their guys back, at all,
they could get Mobley.
Yeah, so if they can get guys back, they'll have a fighting chance. But if they are kind of straggling back on in, if they're not full, I say Indy in 5. I just think that if Indy puts them away in Game 3, it's the same thing. It's over. So that's kind of how I feel about it. All right, so then let's move on to the West. Let's talk about the matchup that happened last night, the crazy matchup that happened last night with the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Golden State Warriors. The Warriors, Yay Area, pulls out a victory, and Steph ends up leaving in this game relatively early. Steph was going off. He had 13 points early in that first half, was doing what he needed to do, and off of collecting a rebound, something with his hamstring got tweaked. And he exited. He didn't come back at all for the game. And they had an MRI this morning, and they said it was a grade 1 hamstring strain, and he will be out for at least a week and will be reevaluated. And based off of the conversations that, pundits and everyone are having with all the information they're gathering regarding Steph, they're saying that a target date would be potentially Game 6 if it makes it there, which would be next Sunday, because the WNBA did, gifted the Warriors an extra day of rest. They have an event. They have a game scheduled at the Chase Center. I believe that Friday of that week. The Warriors play that Wednesday. So the WNBA game will be taking place. So it gives both teams that extra rest. So they're getting an additional day of rest and play on Sunday, but they're playing every other night until that point. So I say all this, and the Warriors won without Steph. So I guess the question that I wanted to ask, let's talk about the Warriors side of things. Do you think without Steph that this team has a chance? Do you think it's going to be, the Wolves? Because remember, we just watched them lose, but it's different to prepare for a game without Steph versus him being gone in mid-game and your whole game plan changes. So I know that that's a little fluky. So do you think that with preparation, the Wolves will have a much easier time without Steph?
Yeah, I do. I think when Steph Curry or any can we say it at this point? Legend isn't going to be playing in the next game. It's easier to game plan around. Obviously at this point, the guys you need to stop on the Warriors is really, Buddy Hield, because apparently they have an MVP caliber candidate over there, and Buddy is another former King. Do we need to talk about that? Buddy Hield, and you also really got to stop Jimmy. And playoff Jimmy is a different breed. And while we're on the topic, I gotta say the relationship that is formed between Jimmy Butler and Buddy Hield has been really fun to watch. I think it's hilarious. These two have great banter back and forth. And you can tell they push each other. And one thing I do notice as we talk about, if the Warriors really stand a chance, I do notice since, Jimmy got to Golden State, and shout out Chad, our boy Chad, for kind of calling this early, whether he intended to or not. Since he got to Golden State, they've really found kind of their championship identity back, and they've found something to really, I guess, what are we looking for right now? An identity. They found that identity, and that's something that the Warriors, they had it, they just needed to implement it. And obviously getting a guy like Jimmy Butler, he brings in a culture, and he brings in a level of effort and hustle that really is rare to see on any platform, let alone even in the NBA platform. So what Jimmy's done for this team is huge. What he's done for individual players like a Buddy Hield, I've never seen Buddy play better defense than what he's playing right now. And I'm talking about his defense before I'm talking about, how many threes he made or how many, plays he made driving to the basket or whatnot. So, do the Warriors have a chance in this series? Absolutely. Draymond Green, he's not a great shooter, but he does everything else very well. And one thing he does really well is get into opposing teams' heads. And that's something to me, like the Timberwolves, if you let a guy like Draymond, rub you the wrong way and he gets up in your head, if he has enough headspace, you're going to struggle the rest of the series. Look at a guy like Domantas Sabonis, who's been completely broken since that series against Draymond Green, right? He broke his chest when he, body slammed him, right? But then obviously, the level of trash talk and the level of consistent effort that Draymond plays with in an entire playoff series is something that is hard to overcome. So I will be curious to see how the Timberwolves handle this.
Yeah, and going back to the Jimmy point of it all, this is why the Warriors made that trade. We've seen playoff Jimmy with worse teams pull off the impossible and carry his teams to the next round or to the finals or wherever he needs to go. I think, he said it after the game. He's like, they're like, oh, how does it feel without Steph? He's like, I miss him. We need him here. We're a lot better with him. But it just kind of goes to show, without Steph, it's not like their defense gets any worse. So it's also one of those things where, yes, you lose the greatest, 3-point threat of all time, and that definitely changes your offense. But when you have Buddy Hield deciding to wake up, like we mentioned, and you have your other role players doing what they need to do, Jimmy just needs to do enough. I think all they need to do, and this is the first time, apparently, reportedly, that Steph has ever had a muscle strain of any kind throughout his career. All of his injuries have involved bones, not muscle, not muscle or whatever, I guess is what they were saying. But so this will be the first time he's ever had to try and rehab and feel this kind of pain before. So that's going to be the big factor of when he comes back, is how he responds to the pain. And again, it's a hamstring injury. It's really touchy. You could think you're good to go, and the next thing you know, you're right back to straining it again, and you're out for another 3 to 4 weeks. But if everything goes right and Steph does come back in game 6, I think if the Warriors just take, one more of these games, if they fall to 3-2 by game 6, I trust that, Steph would be able to get them over the hump in those last 2, or at least give them a much better chance. Do I think they can win it without him, like win the whole series without him? I don't know. And I think the question comes into, let's talk about the Wolves side of things. Comes down to whether the Wolves can freaking make a basket or not. Like, they had an 11-point second quarter. You can't.
Dude, they're historically bad from deep right now. They're 12 of 76 for 3 over the last 2 games.
Yeah, what is that, like 17% or something like
Yeah,
that?
it's terrible. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what it is.
So, and they asked them, Anthony Edwards. That's the thing, right? So this is the prevailing logic that we kind of had with the Celtics, right? Like, yeah, the
Mhm.
Celtics are shooting bad, but they normally shoot well. And it's not like the Wolves weren't this offensive juggernaut. They've looked clunky at times. They're not the most spacious team with the guys that they have, but their offense is capable, and they have the size. They can compete with these guys. Anthony Edwards, I'm not worried about him. They said that, Chris Finch after the game was questioning his energy. They said that, they asked Chris Finch about, the game and Anthony Edwards, and they're like, it starts with him. He's like, I felt that there was times in this game where his spark was needed and he couldn't give it to us. And I didn't see it. And they asked Anthony Edwards about it, and he's like, I don't think that my spark wasn't there. He's like, I just couldn't hit a shot. He's like, my defense was there. I just couldn't hit a shot. He's like, I'll fix that. That'll get better.
He's not wrong. I
He,
do agree with him.
so I guess the question is, how much do we believe that the Wolves will break out of this slump? Because they had 88 points last night. Like, this isn't like
Yeah.
this wasn't like the Warriors have been a good defense. And I think, again, with Steph out, it kind of actually makes them a tiny bit better just in terms of the size you can throw at some of these teams. But I don't know. I trust the Wolves. I want to believe that I trust the Wolves, and I want to believe that they're not going to shoot historically bad the rest of the series. But I also am under the impression that if they get down 2-0, they're going to be, and again, they're another home team down 2-0 potentially. It's just a weird thing to see, and I don't know how I feel, but the NBA has been so weird this year. I do think that the Steph injury, given the fact that they didn't make, if they had avoided the play-in and didn't have to play those extra, that extra game beforehand, I do think it would have helped a ton for the rest of the team. I do think the Warriors are starting to kind of hit that stretch where they are going to start feeling a little worn out, especially by game 3 and 4, where you're playing every other night. So I don't know. If I had to pick, I would pick, I want to say Minnesota in 7. I want to say 7. I don't want to say 6 because I just have a feeling the Warriors are going to get another one, and that we will see Steph one more game in this series. So with that in mind, but I still think the Wolves, as long as they clean up the offense, they'll win this series, and I think they can do that.
Yeah, and it's, cleaning up from a standpoint of not having 16 turnovers as well. The other thing too is you're a taller team, Minnesota. You're a taller team than the Warriors, and yet the Warriors out rebounded you by 10. They out rebounded you 51-41. So it really does kind of boil down to an effort thing at this point. How bad do you want it? You were in your house and you let a team who was, not just handicapped. They didn't have a legend on the floor. You let a team come in and fully control the game from start to finish. That's wild to me. So, and that's another reason, like, for a guy like Anthony Edwards who gets called out by his coach on the podium, which I love that. I don't think we should have ever fired Mike Brown because he was great at doing that. He held his team accountable. He held his star player accountable. He lost his job over it. Hopefully Chris Finch isn't fired tomorrow. We'll see. But he held his guy accountable. I'm really anxious, curious to see how Anthony Edwards responds to that, because I think he's got that kind of a factor in him where you call him out or you make a play on him or whatever, he's going to come back at you with everything he's got and more. And so I'm anticipating a big game out of Ant, and I think game 3 in Oakland, or game 2, in Minnesota is going to be a lot different. I don't think, obviously from a standpoint of, preparation, it's going to be a lot different as well. You're not playing against Steph Curry. If you can get inside, if you can limit the turnovers, and you can control this game from start to finish, you're going to beat this Warriors team. The depth that they have, they have depth, but it's not experienced depth. They're relying on guys like, for the first time in maybe 10, 15 games, Kuminga hit the court last night. And
right.
He hasn't seen the court in since before the regular season ended. So to me, that's kind of like, okay, if you're dipping into, a part of your bench that you have purposely not dipped into, that means that you're struggling to find, production at certain levels. and yet you still managed to get that win. That should stand out to the Timberwolves, and that's something that they've got to capitalize on. But if I had to take one as well, you say 7 games, right?
Mm-hmm. Wolves in 7.
I think it's 6. I think the Wolves will figure this out sooner rather than later. I think that size is going to get them. Regardless, I came into this with the idea that the size was going to bother them, even with a Steph Curry. Obviously, he's not tall, but he's a lethal shooter. But I think the size has got to be a major factor, and it's something that the Wolves have to figure out how to capitalize on starting in this next game.
Absolutely, and it's going to be tough. I think this round 2 has been a really weird backwards styles, for every series here. So it does put the onus on, this is the first time the Warriors have been underdogs since 2013, and everyone had a really good feeling about the Wolves after the Lakers series, rightfully so. And I think that, now with the injuries, even with a bad loss, they still have the more favorable position. So they should win this series. The Wolves should win this series. But there is a part of me just saying that, I think there's a chance the Warriors hang on here and make it a series. So we'll see. All right. So let's check in on the Denver OKC game. What is the score? What are we looking at right now?
So are you pulling it up?
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. I'm trying to find it here real quick.
I was going to say, don't pull it up. Maybe we should talk game 1 first.
Oh, dear God.
And talk about what we, what we need to see in game 2, and then see how we're sitting. Because
okay.
Game 1 was interesting. You want to kick things off for us here?
Yes. So just like every single one of these games, the road team came away with the victory. The Denver Nuggets stunned the Oklahoma City Thunder off of an Aaron Gordon game winner,
Twice.
which again shouldn't have happened. The Thunder, the Thunder were in control. They were supposed to win this game, and they were up 3 with 24 seconds left in a spot where they were in control to make free throws and take free throws. And then they made a poor decision, and Chet couldn't make his free throw, and the rest was history. I do think that, and the Nuggets almost gave up that rebound too, because it was Russ and Braun were going in at the same time, and Russ bailed out, and Braun almost didn't respond, and Williams was coming in there. But then Russ, I want to ask what was your take when Russ had the ball? What did you think he was going to do? Did you think he was going to pass it, or what was your thinking when he had the ball there?
I wasn't really thinking, but in hindsight, I probably would have said that he was going to take it all the way to the rack. He's in Oklahoma City. This is very much, it feels like home ground in a lot of ways, right? Spending so many years there. But it was so funny because I didn't think about that in the moment, but I saw a video after the game, the post-game team for Denver, they're watching the live, and it's, a replay of it. And Brown gets the rebound, and he kicks it out to Russ, and they're like, no, and then he kicks it out to Aaron, and they're like, yes.
Oh,
I was dying, dude. But Russell Westbrook, you've got to make him beat you, kind of thing. And when Russ was dribbling up the court, 2 guys from Oklahoma City came to try and, not necessarily trap him, but try and stop him when Aaron Gordon's leaked all the way on the far side. So there were so many issues in that 2 minutes for me that stood out, because it was very much so like a lack of experience in a lot of ways, which was kind of wild to say, because, you feel like all season long, this OKC team has been dominant from quarter 1 to quarter 4, and just running teams off the court, making games not even close at times. And then you see a collapse like this in the final 2 minutes, with the amount of things that, not just didn't go their way, but they did to themselves. They put themselves in this position. And I was honestly a little shocked by it. And then I was obviously shocked to see the Nuggets, pull this off, because all game long, it's 13 points, it's 8 points. Oh, it's a 5-point game. Nope, it's back to 10 points. And it's like, okay, Denver, yeah, they're hanging around, but it really doesn't feel like they're going to make this, happen. It doesn't feel like they're going to get back into this per se. But, more power to them. They did. They found a way, on a night where Jokic was absolutely incredible. And obviously you get great production from Aaron Gordon as well. So solid game. It was surprising. But ultimately, this Thunder team, what I'm going to be looking for in game 2 is you need to come out and punch him in the mouth. Like you really do. You have to come out and find a way to not let them get any momentum early. Because if you give them any of that, they're going to be able to hang around again because they're going to feel like they, aren't the gap between our two teams isn't that much farther than you think. So I'm looking for that early momentum.
I thought the Thunder, I think what they planned for did not happen in terms of, I think that they thought going into this series they were going to have a better idea of how to plan for Jokic. Kind of in the way like we saw the Clippers, we saw Zubac, like no one can really truly stop Jokic, but Zubac presented that size and physicality and strength to give Jokic trouble. And when we thought we're like, oh, Chet is a good defender. Yeah, he's a little undersized, but he can make up for it. And Isaiah Hartenstein's just another good big body you can throw in there. They didn't have an answer for him at all. And playoff Jamal is a real thing too. He's been playing well all postseason. I think when you get the Nuggets, I think for the OKC, you really need to focus on, the question is, do you want to let Jokic beat you? Or do you want to let Aaron Gordon, beat you with a dagger? And I think that they kind of got caught in the middle of not really honing into a true game plan once things kind of got away from them a little bit. And like you said, and like we talked about, what the whole theme about this team with OKC was their lack of experience and how, you saw the veteran experience of Denver, the team that had won the title. You have players on that team who know exactly what they need to do to win. And the funny part is this has been a meme or a talking point for the Nuggets too, is you see videos on the sideline. I don't see Adelman coaching this team. I see Nikola Jokic coaching this team in timeouts. Jokic is the one drawing up plays. He's the one rallying the guys together.
He's just another Blatt, honestly.
Yeah, David.
He's just another Braun coach.
So it's like you have a player coach like Jokic kind of doing his thing. I think there's an element of like almost like the players are aware of, it's almost like you're playing in like a rec league with your friends. Like, okay, hey, you're going to be coming in here in a couple minutes. Here we go. I need rest. All right. And then we'll go like that way. So It definitely, I think for Denver, I don't think it can carry them to the finals, but it could definitely, this experience will help them. They can get through this series, especially after they took game 1. I thought, I was under the impression like the Thunder were going to be so fresh after, having that extra week before Memphis and then beating the crap out of Memphis. And I was like, okay, they're going to be ready to go, especially after Denver and LA went 7. And I was like, after seeing that, I was like, oh gosh, this is going to be a series. And it's because of the experience. And, on the OKC side of things, they just need to not play sloppy. They need to just stay within themselves. I think that they got a little in their head, and they definitely they didn't stick to what they needed to do to win that game. It was just really frustrating. And again, mental errors is what cost a young team.
Yeah, 100%. And obviously, you're not going to win, the rebound battle against a team like Denver being OKC, but you want to see a little better effort when it comes to the offensive rebounds. You allowed Denver to have 21 offensive rebounds, and regardless of your size, you can't allow that to happen. And I know it's hard, when you have Jokic, when you have Aaron Gordon, you've got guys down low consistently throughout the game who are going to give you hell in the paint. But you've got to find ways to box out, and you've got to find ways to get that ball back, because Denver is going to miss shots, especially if you can force the ball out of Jokic's hands, especially if you put the ball in a guy like Russell Westbrook's hands. There's a reason he has his nickname that he hates, and I'm not going to say it because I love Russell Westbrook. I'll leave it for you if you want to say it.
Heck, but no, I love him.
But, you force him to shoot, you're going to win more games than you're going to lose. And I think that's got to be the key for OKC moving forward is, limiting the production that a guy like Jokic is going to have and forcing those role players in a 7-game series to beat you. It's one thing if it's a single regular season game and you force the role players to beat you and they do it. It's like, what are you going to do?
Right.
Do it to me 4 times. Then, or at least 3 more times. Do it to me 3 more times and prove you're that team. That to me is why I'm like, I don't see Denver doing it.
Right. And you would think it's that simple, right? Like, I think, for the Denver series, it really is just saying, hey, let Russ take 50 shots and see if, it's not, we've seen so many teams do that to him over the past few years. He's just not MVP Russ anymore. He doesn't operate the same. He doesn't play the same anymore. So I do think if you limit a guy like him and basically force him out of the game, I do think that changes something for your team. Like, yeah, when you take him out, you can't like sag off of him the way you normally would. So maybe you want him in those games for that reason alone, and you just kind of take it. But you want him being the one to take those last shots and hope that, at this stage of his career, he might hit one of those, but it's not going to be the same. And yeah, that might be the key to this series. So let's open up game 2 and let's take a peek. Let's take a peek at what we're going on. So we're looking at it right now, and holy crap, OKC's up 30. So
no shot.
OKC right now at halftime, 87-56. So looks like
87 points in the first half.
They had 45 and 42 in the first.
Is that a playoff record?
Probably not, actually. The Nuggets had a 21-point first quarter, so they went down 20 early. So that's what it's looking like right here. Nuggets are shooting 40% from the field, and it looks like Jokic is 5 of 12. Bronze 0-4. Russ actually has 15 points, so he's actually doing doing a lot. And it is a playoff record, by the way. They just announced it was a playoff record, 87 points in the first half. Yeah.
Previous was 86 by Cleveland. I just looked up the record. That's crazy.
Yeah, so Shea's doing his thing. Yeah, everyone's stepping up right now. The starting 5 all has 10-plus points. So they're really putting in the work on Denver. So that's kind of there we go. See, that's what we're talking about. They came out, they took the first punch, and now you really have to come out here and just say, hey, we're not going to let you do that to us anymore. That's good. Yeah.
That's how it has to be, man.
Yeah, the free throw discrepancy is pretty even. It's 18-17. The Nuggets have 8 turnovers to 2. And, the OKC's out rebounding them by 11 right now. They have 5 steals. Yeah, they're kind of owning all the effort stats too. So this is exactly what you need to see if you're OKC, and you avoid potentially. They came back down 30 against Memphis. So who's to say Denver doesn't have that, that fair of a chance? But a 30-point lead, it's looking pretty comfortable. If OKC takes this one and splits the series 1-1, they're feeling like they're in a good spot, especially after you kind of get that first win against a team with that level of experience. So I think, given what I'm seeing here, I'm going to say OKC in 6. I don't want to just be bold and say, they're up 30, they're going to win in 5. I think Denver, you're going to get another Jokic explosion at some point in this series, or a Michael Porter explosion, or a Jamal Murray explosion, and then, they'll get another win. But OKC, great response. That's exactly what you want to see, and that is, what you want to see from the number 1 seed here in the West.
Yeah, and I think 6 games is about right. I'm taking OKC as well. And, the biggest thing for me going into this whole playoff run for OKC that I'm watching is their depth. I mean, this is the deepest team in basketball right now. And just looking at the, minutes right now throughout this game too, the Thunder have 8 players with over 10 minutes. They've gone already 11 players deep into their bench, and it's halftime. The Nuggets have only gone 8 players deep, and 6 of them have 15 minutes or more. The other 2 have 6 minutes or less. So this is the difference between, a team who's been really the golden example of how to rebuild a basketball team versus a team that, has won their championship and had to pay guys a ridiculous amount of money to hold on to them, right? And you don't have a lot of those young contracts left anymore. And now you're relying on less, depth, and you're relying on the production of your big dogs. So this is a lot of the reason why, Marcos, I took OKC was they've got these younger guys. They've got the depth for a run like this. And all season long, they've proved to be the most dominant team in basketball. So what the Thunder are doing to the Nuggets right now is pretty that's men against boys from what it sounds like.
Yeah, that's what you want to see. We've referenced this a few times. The Thunder are truly a team that feel 12 deep, and they can handle losing a couple guys too and feel confident about the guys replacing them above them. Denver's not the same. You mentioned the teardown post championship, and it's not even just that too. They didn't hit on their draft picks, and they had guys, they don't have the same level of rotational players that OKC has, and they haven't hit the same way. So this just, that's what happens. And yeah, Jokic and Jamal are going to do enough to steal you another game. But if OKC keeps rolling like this, it's going to be tough to beat them.
So that was our playoff round 2 matchup conversations. Really juicy matchups, and we're excited to watch how these fold out. But Marcos, I think we have some Eagles news. Is that
Yes.
right?
Yes. So we're going to move on here with some final thoughts. It's just really one because a piece of Eagles news came out today. Last week, the Niners signed their George Kittle to a nice contract extension, kept him around long term. The Eagles did the same thing with their tight end Dallas Goedert, only it was just a 1 year thing. The topic of the offseason. So the Eagles are keeping Dallas Goedert. He remains on the team through 2025. They signed him they restructured his contract. So instead of 14 million that wasn't guaranteed, none of it was guaranteed last year going into this year. So they restructured it. So now he gets $10 million guaranteed with 1 million in incentives on the way if he meets certain goals. So this was a move that I wasn't sure what was going to go down with this team, because going into this offseason, I was like, oh yeah, Goddard's going to be here. And then they were talking about him as a salary dump. And I was like, okay. Then they were talking about trading him prior to the draft. So there was a lot of Dallas Goedert news. So the Eagles keeping Dallas Goedert is a great sign of they feel confident in the rest of the depth that they have behind them. They want him to take one more chance with this team and really go all in this offense to try and repeat and win a Super Bowl again. So, for Goddard, this gives him another opportunity to climb up the Eagles leaderboard and compete with Zach Ertz as potentially the greatest tight end to play for this city. And really happy to have him on board for next year, no matter what happens. So, you got us. He was a huge reason why we made it as far as we did in the Super Bowl. And throughout the playoffs, he was one of Jalen's favorite targets and made big play after big play for us all season. So that's always a great thing to have Goddard back for sure.
Yeah, and based on how the draft went, you kind of figured that the direction they would end up going is finding something, short term that works for both parties to keep Goddard around. So it's solid to see him back. As far as that, that run it back and win the Super Bowl, tough chance. We'll get into those conversations next week, baby, because the NFL schedule for all 32 teams drops next Wednesday. So we're going to be breaking that down. We're going to have all these conversations. We're going to talk about our over and unders on win projections and kind of how we anticipate the season to go for our two teams. And ultimately I'll break down how the Niners are going to end up, dominating the NFC and finally winning their sixth championship. And Marcos will be talking about how it's time to blow it up at the end of the season, right?
No, you're right. And honestly, yeah. So in terms of, we're still going to plan on, August, September doing the win, our division predictions, our record predictions for every team. But just for this exercise, just for next week, we're going to go over our schedules only, talk about what the win totals have been out for, I want to say a month or so now. But we're going to actually talk about it now that the draft is over and everything like that, and see now how we truly feel once we get that schedule in front of us and what gauntlets are where and who's going to, what kind of scheduling snafus, like they want to schedule us on bad, 3 games in 10 days type of thing. Those are the things we're going to look out for. I'm going to be focused on my travel time and all this stuff that I like to focus on when the schedule comes out.
Rest disadvantage over here.
Exactly. Rest disadvantage. Yep. So those are the things we're going to look out for. And, we're going to break that down in detail next week. So it comes out on the 14th, a week from today. So it'll be the day we're recording. So you guys will get that next Thursday, nice and fresh. So we're really excited about that. But
yes, sir.
With that being said, any final thoughts before we head out here, brother?
No, I'm good, bro. I said it.
Okay. One last question. 100 men, 1 gorilla. Who's winning? This has been the trend that I've been seeing for the past week and a half, and I don't understand it. I don't know where it got started, but we need to make an answer here on BTB what we think who would win 100 men versus a gorilla.
Well, this is frustrating because we're already an hour plus, right? We're in an hour 10 now. And you want this to be a 2-hour episode. You asked for it, bro. I mean, let's get into it. No. It depends. To me, it depends on the guys. It depends on the men you're rolling out to this battle. And it really does rely on, who the first 30 guys are. How tired can you get that gorilla? If you can exhaust that guy, make that gorilla work hard on those first 30 to 50 dudes, then I think the last 50 stand a chance at forming some kind of a choke out or something. I don't know, but I'm probably going to take the gorilla because odds are, if it's anything like I expect, these guys are not going to be ready for that fight.
What if it's 50 me's and 50 U's going at it?
If 50 U's take the first shots, I think 50 Bennies can finish up the job. But if it's the other way around, good luck, brother.
We're just gonna have to run around and wear them out first, and then get our jabs in. But yeah, no. So that's been the topic. I don't understand where the heck it even came from, but I thought it was important that we get that here, that nonsense here on the BTB pod. So with that being said, we'll close that episode out here. This was episode 87 of the Behind the Back podcast. You can hit us up at behindthebackpod13@gmail.com. For all you watching on YouTube or on video, the links to our socials are up above. For all you audio listeners out there, the links to the descriptions are down below. Please give us a like, subscribe, rate, follow, review the show. We appreciate all the love and support we've been getting each and every week as we grow with you guys. A lot of off-season changes are coming your way. We're excited to go through all these fun topics. And also, the tush push probably being banned here next week. We'll probably have to bring that up too.
Please.
So a lot of fun stuff coming up off-season wise. And we'll find out, the NBA draft lottery is coming up too. We're going to find out if the Kings keep their pick. And, that's a whole nother discussion. So we'll bring that up when we know more. So some fun topics to touch up on, but we'll see you guys next week. So I am Marcos Conan Negron. Beside me here, as always, is
Ben the Jet Reds.
All right, y'all. We love you so much. We will talk to you next week. Peace.
Peace.